Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Mumbai, India, Mr. Rahat Kulshreshtha. Rahat, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. Really excited to see where this conversation goes.
Thank you. Rahat is the Chief Executive Officer of Quidich Innovation Labs. He's the Chairman of the Drone Federation of India. And for the first time, I have a filmmaker turned entrepreneur. So Rahat, my first question to you before we move to Quidich is tell me about your journey from a filmmaker to founding Quidich Innovation and what inspired you to start it.
So it's one of those journeys which when, you look back, you kind of see the path and it makes sense. But if I was to look at myself 10 years ago, there was no way in hell that I could predict a journey like this because it's been full of all kinds of randomness, all kinds of moments of pure serendipity. I started film in England and worked in the film industry in the UK. And suddenly had Desh Bhakti jago in me and be like, I have to come back to India. Like, if I stay on any longer, I'll get too used to the systems in the UK and never be able to come back. So I moved back. I was directing music videos for about a year and realized that that's not my calling for sure. And decided to take a break and do a 1-year, fellowship, a liberal arts course at the Young India Fellowship at Ashoka University.
Yeah,
and that's really where got to do a little bit of self-discovery, play around with different ideas, and something as random as a college project, which was an experiential learning module, which my roommate was able to convince me and say that, hey, let's just do a business. You've got this drone, let's try and set up a drone business and experiment with it. And literally, it was my roommate Gaurav who was able to convince me to do this as a college project. Both of us started in college as an experiment, and here we are 10 years later as a company that's, dabbled around with drones in all kinds of businesses. We've shot some of the most incredible Bollywood films, opening sequences from Sanju, Gully Boy, Brahmastra. We've done drone shots for these films, to now delivering some of the most incredible technology that you see on your screens when you're watching any kind of sport. So I'm sure we'll go into more details of this.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So now let's talk about Quidich Innovation Labs. You are doing both films and sports. What are some of the initial challenges you faced as an entrepreneur when you started to get into this business?
I think one of the initial challenges for us primarily was regulation, because we were we were definitely first movers. 10 years ago, there were no drones. Nobody knew about them. And, there were places where you would fly it and people would suddenly, fall on their knees and imagine like, God has arrived, because you've never seen something like a flying object like this. So, we came from a place where there was complete unawareness of the technology.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, there was a lot of regulatory challenges that we had to spend a lot of time trying to navigate and understand. I think that was one part of it. The other part was, definitely just understanding what it means to bootstrap a business, because we spent 10 years bootstrapping the story literally out of a college dorm room into my parents' garage. And then, from there to now 100 people that are being able to deploy all of these technologies across the globe. How do you manage, innovation in a completely cash-strapped environment where, the only investment that we had was 10 lakh rupees and that was it? How do you go from there to building new pieces of technology and actually being able to create revenue and profitability out of that? I think that was another journey that, took its time for us to pivot, experiment, learn, understand ourselves more and more, and then get to a point where we could, find a good product market fit and find value that we could create exponentially.
And how receptive were your customers? The television programs were broadcasting on sports or the filmmakers to using drones, which is a very new medium.
No, great question. So I think when we started, the exciting part was that we were doing lots of things. We were doing anything and everything drones. So there were certain industries that were a lot harder to kind of crack into. So legacy industries like, roads, mining, that kind of stuff. It would take like, 8-10 months to be able to convince somebody that there was something useful. Film was actually pretty easy because what the drones were doing in film was effectively, replacing a helicopter shot. So, they already had precedence of something that was happening. This was much cheaper, much better, much more capability because you could do the high helicopter shot, but then you could also come all the way into into the house of a balcony, the opening shot of Sanju, where we started from the sea and came all the way, to the window where he was standing. So, you could do a lot more. So film was a lot easy. Sport, which is where we spend most of our time, the entire business is now, primarily built around sports technology. Sports was a very interesting one. It took its time. For 2 years, we just did free demos to just, convince the BCCI and other clients that, there is value of a drone shot in a sports broadcast. It started with a cold email and 2 years of just consistent effort to make sure that, yeah, we believe it'll work to now making it work for sport globally.
Incredible. And tell me, how do you think drones and robotic camera buggies have changed the narrative of sports storytelling?
So I'll actually take that to one step further and just sort of generalize it to how technology is actually being able to, enhance storytelling fundamentally in sport. I think the way sport was broadcast and the evolution of sport kind of started with you being able to hear it on the radio, or initially just read it in a newspaper, then you could hear it, then you could see it on TV. And as sort of the television medium evolved, we kind of went from 1 camera to 5 cameras to, 20 cameras to now almost, between 30 and 40 cameras in a field. So we've been able to exhaust every possible angle. And I think, what the drone and the buggy do really, really well is add one more layer of an angle that wasn't possible before. So the drone gives you these shots from outside the stadium. So suddenly when you see a match of happening at the Wankhede Stadium, you've got this, beautiful Wankhede Stadium that, most viewers have never seen from up above. And then you've got the beautiful Queen's Necklace with a nice sunset happening at the back. So you get the sense of the stadium in the context of the city, which is really nice. The buggy camera brings you really low angle, gets you into the action. When a batsman gets out, the buggy goes in, follows him out. So you can really feel the emotion, really get a sense of, that batsman and what he's feeling as he's lost his wicket. So you get the viewer right into the action. And then what we've been able to do is build layers of technology on top of this. So all of the player tracking that you see, for example, on any of the cricket globally now, where, on the left side, you'll see a green box that comes that shows players moving in real time, distances between the players. We use a whole AI stack to be able to do that. And again, this becomes very critical for storytelling because, in cricket, we've always heard so many stories about batting and bowling, but fielding is a very, very critical element of the sport. But there was no camera that actually showed you the whole view of the field and could help the viewer understand what the strategy is. What is the captain and the bowler discussing when he's trying to move this guy back? Why is he moving it back? You had no visual to substantiate that, that discussion. And suddenly now with QT, which is the Quidich tracker that shows you all of the live tracking, we're able to build in that entire narrative that shows you a visual for how players are moving on the field, what is the strategy, what they might be thinking, and suddenly it gives the commentators a visual to be able to help the viewers connect to the fielding narrative of the sport. So, for us, the question that you've asked is really important because really what we do as a company is use technology to be able to enhance the quality of storytelling and the understanding of the sport for the fans sitting at home.
I was commenting to someone in the World Cup exactly about Wankhede, and I said, what a beautiful view. And now we're getting to see the Queen's Necklace. And now I know the man behind it. Thank you. Wonderful. You. So my next question, Rahat, is how have fans responded to the use of augmented reality in live broadcasting?
So I think augmented reality has a really exciting opportunity in it to be able to, what does it do? It gives you a sense of you've got a shot and suddenly you can now create something within the shot that the viewer sitting at home will be like, was that real? Was that not real? What just happened? That feeling of that little bit of suspension of disbelief to be able to get viewers excited. And I think that's a really powerful element. We've been able to now, build it into the narrative of the sport. So for example, the toss that you'll see the toss happen, and right after that, you'll see a drone shot with a big coin tossing out, and it shows you who won the toss.
Yeah.
Just the fireworks at the end. I think it's such a powerful thing that we've been able to do without actually having to spend all of that money, and more importantly, all of that pollution. We're now able to, the viewers in the field are not able to get the sense that they got when you saw fireworks, but at least the people at home, we gave this beautiful firework display at the end of the match to reveal who was the winner of the game. And it does exactly the same thing that, fake fireworks would have, or real fireworks would have done, at least for the viewers sitting at home, with the same sound effects and the same visualization. So I think the reception of from a visual perspective has been great. I think the other thing we're able to do with augmented reality is really bring in some very interesting storytelling points. So, you'll see key milestones come up. You'll see, analysis that you wouldn't have normally seen, between a batter and a bowler combination, or something about the team that was totally unique, and as a viewer you wouldn't have known. So we're able to use the augmented reality space on the broadcast as a tool to be able to just find very, very interesting trivia stories, or just milestones that are really important for the viewers to be able to know and learn. And I think it's been great for the fans sitting at home to be able to enjoy the breadth of things that AR gives us.
Amazing. You mentioned a few minutes back about now you covering sports all over the world. My next question is, how do you collaborate with sports organizations to ensure that technology actually enhances rather than distracts from the game?
That's a really, really important question, because it's a very easy trap to fall into. With technology, everybody gets excited and you're like, okay, let's try and do this new. But it's very important to ensure that the integrity of the game and the integrity of what really matters in the storytelling of the sport is maintained, and the technology doesn't distract. So, it's something that we work very, very closely with the producers of the sport, because the producer is sort of the custodian of what is going to be communicated. And we take our time with every sport. So, it takes a little bit of time to be able to intuitively understand what does the broadcast of a sport look like. So for cricket, for us to now build a new technology is easy, because we've been doing cricket for now, over 6 years. We really understand, when we're looking at a shot, we very intuitively know what's the next shot going to be, because we've seen so much of it. So we understand the narrative, and when we're building a new piece of technology, we ensure that, it very seamlessly fits into all of this. We know, who is thinking what before we're building a piece of technology. So what is important for the producer? What is important for the director? What is important for the commentator? Because most importantly, if a visual comes up and the commentator doesn't talk about it, it doesn't help the viewer at all, because, suddenly, some technology came, but there's no context to the viewer. So, we've got to ensure that all of these stakeholders understand what the technology is, and then ensure that whatever we're building is only adding value and in no way taking away. And which is why when we enter into new sports, we really take our time. We're doing golf now. We're doing Live Golf this month in Abu Dhabi. We chose to not go in with very heavy tech. We've kind of gone with simpler stuff. Go in there, really understand what the narrative of the sport is. It's like writing a book or making a film. You can't make the best film as your first film. You've got to make a few. You've got to really get into it, intuitively understand the process of what it is to visualize, what it is to look forward, what it is to script, storyboard. So we've got a process like that, like you would do for making a film. We've got a process like that for making our technologies for any new sport, or for cricket for that matter. And then we ensure that by design of how we've done it and all of the stakeholders that we've kept in mind, we're able to ensure that we're trying our best not to distract. I can't say we always succeed. We do sometimes end up in situations where we are more distracting than we should be. But the feedback doesn't take long to come back, because sport is something that gives you instant feedback. You do something that's annoying, and Twitter, gives you the answer within a few minutes of you having made that mistake. So I think it's great.
Great response. Thank you. My next question, Rahat, is that you are in a very competitive industry technologically. What are you doing to stay ahead?
Ooh, that's a tough one. We've ended up in a time today, Ashutosh, where the speed of technology change has become so fast that, it's sometimes hard for us to just stay on the edge. And the only answer to your question is to stay on the edge, is to stay one step, at least, even if not ahead today, even just staying at speed with what is happening is important. It was very funny. I was having a conversation with somebody about this tracking technology that we built. And, I was talking about it, and I was like, when we were building it, beginning of COVID, it was early stages of AI. And he looked at me and he's like, you're talking about 3 years ago. Suddenly I thought about this and I was like, my God, literally it felt like 3 years ago was early days of AI. And today we're in a place where, suddenly when we're talking about AI, the meaning of that word itself has changed so many times in the last 3 years. That I think the answer to your question is just, ensuring that you're able to stay one step ahead and just be aware of what is happening, because what technology fits into your stack, you never know how it'll incrementally increase the value of what you create. And the way we're doing it now at Quidich is to build an independent innovation lab that essentially works on just R&D. So we're just, experimenting with the latest things, what is happening in LLM, what is happening in, regenerative art, experimenting with these algorithms to be able to make sure that we understand enough of it, that the moment we find a plug and play into our existing stack, we're just able to, pick up something, plug it into our existing workflows and deliver it to the world.
Incredible. So one more question relating to Quidich, and then I want a few questions on the Drone Federation. Rahat, as someone who's significantly impacted the way we consume sports and media, what is your vision for the future of sports broadcasting?
So I think I'll answer in two forms. The short form, the short term for us is to be able to integrate pieces of technology and deliver sort of this technology as a package solution to viewers in a way that they can connect to the sport a lot more. For us, sport is all about the unity and all about the excitement that brings us together. I don't think there's anything like sport that transcends across boundaries, religions, political allegiances. When you're supporting a Mumbai Indians or when you're supporting the Indian team, it doesn't matter what background you come from, you are all one. And I think that's something really, really powerful about sport. We want to be able to use our technologies to be able to increase that engagement, excitement, and commitment towards sport in the short term. In the long term, for us, what is really, really exciting is the ability to be able to take the stadium experience into people's homes. Sport started, in the stadium. That was the way that we consumed it. It went from there to newspapers, to radio, to TV. And then, the last upgrade of content has moved on to OTT, which has become a very, very individual experience. You're on your mobile phone, you're sitting and watching the sport. And, there isn't any kind of human connection left. You're left with, just the video of what's happening on the field and yourself.
Yeah.
But that feeling of standing in the stadium and suddenly the national anthem plays and you have goose pimples, that feeling of when there is a six and everybody rises in that excitement. We want to be able to deliver that experience again back at home. And we're building an entire technology stack that now will enable viewers sitting on their couch to experience what it is to be in the stadium while leveraging all of the advantages of what we have with television broadcast, of replays, and being much closer to the action. And we're building sort of an experience that bridges that gap to just fundamentally enhance the viewing experience of sport.
Incredible. So you think that we'll see Quidich and all your products in the metaverse so that I can, sitting on my couch, see the game in 3 dimensions?
Very soon. Very soon.
I look forward to that. Thank you. So Rahat, now let's talk a little bit about the Drone Federation of India. Tell me a little bit more about the Drone Federation of India and its mission. And for my viewers and listeners, this may not be as exciting as all the stuff that you've just heard from Rahat on Quidich.
No, it is actually very exciting. It's a testament to the government. It's a testament to what we've been able to achieve as a country, over the last few years. The Drone Federation of India was something that we put together as a bunch of 5-6 companies about 6 years ago, where we could see that the regulation of drones was not something that was conducive to the industry being able to grow. And we realized that the government needs some sort of a support system to be able to at least get knowledge sharing from the industry in a more streamlined manner, so that there wasn't a gap of information as they made the regulation. The regulation itself was very complicated because it's not just one ministry that needs to, just write a piece of regulation. Because there are security risks, there are all kinds of risks. It was multiple ministries getting together to be able to build out a regulation. And I think as the Drone Federation, we kind of built it with the mission to be the bridge between industry and regulators and academia. And I think we've been able to do a really, really successful job. The team in the secretariat that runs it has, built it with a lot of passion, and there's a lot of time and effort that's gone into, just getting all the stakeholders on board to be able to understand that we're here just to be able to support both sides, which is the industry and government, in just ensuring that we can have a robust regulation, we can have an industry that grows. Because with the size of the landmass in India, the potentials of drones is probably the most valuable in our country, because what drones are able to do is able to get from point A to point B in lesser amount of time than any other piece of technology in that form factor. And because of the landmass that we have, just the applications across all industries is pretty phenomenal. So I think the mission was to be able to get to a point where regulation allowed us to be able to operate. It took a little bit of time, but I think where we are at and what the Federation has been able to do in the process of, supporting the regulation, getting it to where it is, and making it, day by day more and more accessible to everyone, I think is something that I'm really, really proud of, and really happy that the government was able to see that support and give it its due space to be able to give the recommendations and suggestions to get us to where we are today.
Amazing. Two more questions for you. My next question is, are there still any major regulatory challenges facing the use of drone technology in India?
So yes, they are. But I think the difference between where we were a few years ago and today is that today there is clarity. Today there is a regulation that you can read. There is something that is a yes and something that is a no. Where there is a yes, you can go and fly. Where there is a no, you can apply for a exemption. Mm-hmm. So I think what's fundamentally changed is that there is at least a process. There is, that this is an okay and this is not an okay. And I think that's a much better place to be than just not knowing and always having to look over your shoulder and be like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Because in 2018 we were in a situation where there was a complete ban on drones in the country, and suddenly we were going from one of the most exciting businesses to effectively a completely illegal business, and we were like, what's going on? So I think it's a much better place than that. There are definitely challenges. But I think as we keep moving forward, the intent from the ministry, both from the minister, the joint secretary, everybody is making a very consolidated effort to make it easier. Earlier we used to feel that the effort is actually to make it harder, but clearly now the intent is to make it easier so that industry can flourish. And I think that intent is very clear, and that intent is also converting into action very clearly.
Fascinating. And my last question to you. How is the Federation working towards responsible drone usage? And are there any exciting projects of the Federation that you may want to share with us?
So currently, a lot of the time and effort goes on to policy and, just bringing the industry and academia and regulators together. But I think, certain times when we need to be able to help, the Drone Federation really comes into action and activates the whole industry really, really well. I think one of the most interesting examples that I saw was during COVID, where suddenly police in different areas reached out to us and said that we want to be able to find people that are breaking the law and actually stepping out into the streets. And suddenly we created this entire network of drone operators that were sitting in their homes, being able to fly for the police without actually having to leave. Upload to a centralized portal in Mumbai where the police was being able to access all of this, and wherever they found people, they were GPS tagged, and immediately a local policeman could go to that area and make sure that people were going back into their houses. That's a small example of what we did during COVID. There have been lots of other examples of how we've activated. There was somebody in Nepal during the Annapurna climb, had a fall into a crevice, to activate drones to get there, to be able to support the government with any of cross-border terrorism and be able to, go into the details of what is happening with inside the drone, where it came from, and so on. So we're able to find lots of different ways to be able to support the ecosystem in just, helping the use of drones in a manner that is good for society, and at the same time, advocate for as much good drone use as possible.
Oh, amazing. And on that note, Rahat, I just want to say what an amazing conversation I've had with you. Thank you so much for talking to me about what you say, was an accidental journey from being a filmmaker to becoming such a major player in the drone business through Quidich Innovation Labs. Thank you for talking to me about so many different aspects of sports coverage using drones. And I'm sure you're just about beginning to scratch the surface between cricket and now with Live Golf. Thank you also for talking to me about some of the work that you're doing for India through the Drone Federation. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.